Hello, everyone. If you are seeing this, you're joining us today for another Ask Me Anything. We are here with Amelia and Rose to cover Native American Heritage Month. So thank you all for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. Y'all ready? Amelia, Rose, yep. All right. So my first question for you is, what does Native American Heritage Month mean to you?
Yeah, so for me, Native American Heritage Month is a time for Native peoples who are usually rendered invisible, whether that's in media, within our programs and our agencies, in our schools. It's a time for us to really sort of, you know, show who we are, to talk about the issues that are facing our communities, and to really celebrate like who we are as peoples, celebrate our ancestors. I remember a couple years back during it was actually Indigenous Peoples Day, which is like the day that kicks off Native American Heritage Month. Um, I did this sort of like I felt this like I had to make this homage to my ancestors, and it was like I was about 6 months postpartum, and I just remembered feeling so just like, oh, we're still here, we're still, bringing babies into the world, and we're still raising them in our traditional life ways and teaching them our languages. And so for me, Native American heritage is all year round, right? But this month is an opportunity for folks to sort of see us and hear us, and for us to sort of have that platform to be able to talk about those issues.
Thank you, Amelia. And a quick follow-up question to that, because for those who did not pay attention to Amelia's bio, I was going to say some context of that importance to you as well.
Yes, yes. So sorry. So my name is Amelia Romo Olivas, and I am a Tagu. I'm a woman of the Tap Pilam Coahuiltecan Nation, and I'm auteka paguame, which is waterbird clan. Um, and so I say to Ilmanam, good morning to you all. Thank you so much for having me, Courtney, and I'm so honored to be here with you, Rose.
Thank you, Amelia. So my next question is, how do you see sexual violence and historical trauma impacting Indigenous communities?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a huge one, and I think you know, my work at TAASA. So I'm the learning and evaluation specialist here at TAASA. Work on the evaluation team, um, and I think really sort of a lot of the things that I do and I'm active in my community here, it's sort of it's like the things that I'm passionate about is addressing the ways that historical trauma, the symptoms of historical trauma, which we believe is sexual violence is one of them, right? And so it was Ogala Sioux, Indigenous scholar, Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart, who really kind of brought into the mainstream in the early 2000s this concept of historical trauma for Native communities. And she actually used a historical point for the Lakota people, which was the massacre of Wounded Knee. And she has this really extensive research, and it's like, super incredible. And it gave a lot of, I think, Native communities a lot of language around how we talk about what's going on in our communities, right? Because a lot of times our men are sort of demonized, right? Like our communities are kind of painted as this, like, on drugs and alcohol and just dysfunctional in all sorts of ways, right? That's the sort of like stereotype of Native people. And we know, here in Texas, and I'll speak to my region because that's what I'm most familiar with, the South Central. Like here in Yanaguana is the traditional name that we use in our language for what's also currently known as San Antonio, Texas. And so, which is where our tribal nation is sort of like, our lands extend all the way down into Coahuila in Mexico. And so we had the mission system here, right? A lot of folks are talking about boarding schools and the violence of boarding schools and how sexual violence in particular, right, was used as a tool for subjugation. It was used as a tool of colonial violence, right? Sexual violence, right? And so it's really, when I think about historical trauma, when I think about the issues that our communities are facing today, you know, the tools of the colonizer, which were sexual violence, we are seeing that in our communities, right? We are seeing, you know, the fallout of that, right? Which is a lot of times, you know, it seems like everyone has been pretty familiarized with the campaign to bring awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women, people, Two-Spirit folks in particular, right? And so I think there's ways in which sexual violence harms and impacts Native communities and Native women and Two-Spirit people in particular, that I can go into probably a little later on. But, you know, I think that there are these movements and there's these conversations that we're trying to bring to the table, you know, for folks to be thinking about, right? That yes, it's within our communities, but the way that racism operates, right? The way that we know anti-Indigenous sentiment operates and the way that people view Native women and queer folks, Two-Spirit folks in particular, has a huge impact on how we are assaulted, abused, murdered in, I mean, just the most abysmal, alarming rates, right? So yeah, I don't know. I can say so much about that, but you know, I can totally go on. I don't know if Rose, you wanted to add.
Historical trauma. When I first learned it, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Now we can.
Sorry. Okay. I don't know what in the hell is up with this laptop, but this happened to me last time. I don't know. Hopefully y'all can hear me, but so no, historical trauma, when I first learned about that, that was such a deep, profound, I think, light bulb that went off in my head. You know, you read about this, you know, you learn about it, but there was some significance about that term, historical trauma, and all that it brings and what it means. Even things as in it's through, you know, the history and the stories and that being passed on. It's also like almost genetic, right? It's almost like you feel it, you know, when you hear the term, feel it in our bones. Like it is something that it is just a deep, deep thing. And that I think that as a society that we should learn more about so that maybe we can then begin to take steps into some form of healing and reconciliation at some level. And then when I think about it in terms of the work that we do, you know, sexual assault, rape crisis centers, I think historical trauma should be at the heart of how we're approaching each and every survivor, their uniqueness. There is historical trauma at some level, I think, in everyone, but in particular when we're talking about communities and even acknowledging and identifying the impact of historical trauma on different communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like too, you know, thank you for bringing that up because I know I had mentioned this before whenever I got super rambly at the tech run. But I'm just that, you know, there's this like, you know, this concept that Native communities, and we're not a monolith, right? So many of our nations and tribes have different concepts entirely from each other, right? But by and large, you will find that a lot of Native communities have this concept of like our ancestors are within us, right? So some of that wisdom of like, you know, intergenerational trauma and intergenerational healing, I think too, in that sense, not to put them on this sort of like binary, but you know, our ancestors live within us, therefore intergenerational trauma is a thing, right? And all of the ways and the things that they learned, the teachings that they picked up in their life, we have those too, right? We have everything that we need inside us to heal within our communities. And that's sort of, you know, something that we talk about a lot within like, you know, language revitalization, cultural revitalization. A lot of Native people are doing that work right now. as a response to the fact that, you know, we were made to be codependent on you know, reservations. So, you know, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, you know, you name it, right? The federal government. And so because of that codependency, a lot of that sort of, we say, went to sleep, right? We didn't lose these things. They went to sleep, but we're getting them back, right? And we're trying to do that work of healing. So the field of epigenetics is just kind of scientifically catching up to what Native people, I think, have always known. And so it's really cool to just think about, like, yeah, you know, that wisdom is there inside us. The ability to heal, the ability to speak our truth, you know, and knowing that that's medicine too, you know. So thank you for bringing that up, Rose. Yeah.
Thank you both. And going and diving into historical trauma on a mass scale, as well as within Indigenous communities. You touched on this somewhat, but what barriers do you feel survivors in Indigenous communities face in Texas?
Yeah. I mean, and I can just go based off of what I've seen, right? And that's the whole concept of just being invisibilized, right? You know, a lot of times, you know, there have been Six Flags that have flown over Texas, and none of them have recognized Native people on our lands here for who we are and belonging to this land and to these lands here. And so, you know, I think the being rendered invisible, I think, is probably one of the biggest barriers for Indigenous people here in Texas. You know, especially for survivors, right? There's really this in Texas, because we don't have a reservation, right? Because by and large, Native people in Texas, their reservations, like, for example, bands and clans of Apache peoples, you'll find reservations, just not here, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times there is traveling, and I think that's what's really cool a lot of times about going to ceremony around here is, like, Native people will hear, oh, there's a ceremony going on, and it's like, we want to go, or there's a powwow going on, like, okay, bet, I'll be there. And so, and it's like everywhere else, there's a sort of menu of options when you go to therapy or anywhere seeking help, right? You've just been assaulted, or you're finally ready to leave a relationship, leave a situation, leave a home where there is violence. You go, and it's sort of like, well, your last name is, Ramirez, and so you're Hispanic, right? And so getting lumped into categories and being named without sort of your consent, right? A lot of Native people here have Hispanicized the last names. We were colonized by the Spanish first. And so, I think that's huge too, right? For folks to remember that not all people with Hispanic last names might identify as Latinx or Latina, right? And so, that said, I think there are ways that okay, wait, that's the next question. But those are the barriers. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
No worries, no worries. We can jump right into it. It's actually a question for you both. What support do you think centers could do to help further?
Yeah, and I don't know, Rose, do you want to talk? I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, you keep talking. I'll talk after you.
Okay. So I talk a lot about the nonprofit that's affiliated with our tribal nation is American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions, and there's several different organizations that are affiliated with various tribal nations, and there's definitely lots of there's at least 3 here who we sort of we acknowledge each other as Native peoples of these lands, and we have different names for this land, right? Speak different languages. But American Indians in Texas at the Spanish colonial missions is the example that I'll use. And the work that they're doing is really trying to create like an urban Indian center, or like a hub, right? Where Native people can seek, just for example, and I did talk about this a little bit in our tech run, but it's where I'm going. I'm pregnant right now, and so I'm going there to, get sort of prenatal care through the doula services that they have there, and it's culturally specific in the sense that, the person who will be a partner or support, right, during birth. And I will talk a little bit about this, and maybe this is also a part of the previous question, is that as a survivor myself, right, there's this really, and I think a lot of people can speak to this, becoming a parent and becoming sort of moving through. In my bio, I call myself a traditional birthkeeper. And one of the things that means is that, I adhere to birth as a ceremony. And a lot of the folks in our tribal nation, the women in particular, are, talking through, working out, doing that work in community of, the term is rematriating. And there's a really cool episode on it in the All My Relations podcast that I always refer people to if they are unfamiliar with the term rematriating, as it pertains to Native communities in particular. But I believe that is going to be sent out afterwards, the link to that podcast episode. But it's a Native run and produced podcast. It's called All My Relations. It's really awesome. These two Native women. Anyway, but so we're doing this work of rematriating, right? And one of those barriers, and also, ways that I think folks in the community that are maybe outside who are non-Native people can support, is through acknowledging that, in particular, people who are giving birth are way more. We kind of, the concept is that we're sort of like the bridge in between worlds, right? It's like spiritually how we talk about it. And so, like, for me, that means that when I was in labor, there were I felt like a lot of sort of this like intergenerational, like being triggered, but intergenerationally, like, and so body sensations, right? But also, the parts of the body, right, that are involved in birthing, that are involved in bringing forth life and bringing forth our future generations, as we say, right, like in our tribal communities. I felt sort of re-traumatized in a lot of ways, right? And so I could not imagine if I did not have 7th generation birth services and the doula support there, the culturally specific doula support. I didn't have to fill out a form disclosing that I'm a survivor of sexual violence, right? But in a moment when I really needed that care, when I really needed people to affirm and validate that, like, that was real, that really did happen. And me too, right? I think those are that's such a powerful thing. And I mean, I know it was life-saving. I think if I had felt isolated, if I felt alone, if I felt, I'm going crazy here, that would have been so hard, right? And so I really highly encourage centers and programs to look into, what are Native communities in your area? Is there an Indian center, an urban Indian center? Are there places that you can refer people who identify and self-identify as Native American, where you can, and maybe they're not from around there, right? There is a lot of traveling for work, right? That a lot of Native people do, and referring, right? And I know, Rose, you've got some 2 cents about this too, right? So I would definitely want to pass that off to you, but to just like remind people, right, that this work it touches every aspect of our lives, right? It's not just I called a hotline, or I went to therapy, or I had hospital accompaniment, and it sort of ended there, right? I know people whose whose assault happened later, and they were adults even, or college students, and it came up during birth, right? And like, I feel like this is such a phenomenon we don't really talk about. It's like, parents will talk about it, like birthing people, moms will talk about it, but it's not it's like, man, how are we supporting people when in this birth and postpartum period there's so much with the body, right? And our body keeps the score, right? That's sort of what there's books and stuff on that, but just the somatic responses to trauma, they can come at various times and at really culturally important times, right? Like, I'm a portal being, like, what, you know what I mean? Like, these are things that we call our birthing folks, right? That we're portals, we're bridges between the worlds, and it's this important moment. And I was triggered, you know what I mean? My body was not there, so anyway, I know, Rose, you have some stuff to say too about that, but
Thank you, Amelia, for sharing that, though.
Yeah, no, Amelia, just listening to all the things that you've said, and in particular, needing in that moment, what you needed in that moment of transfer, or during the portal area moment. It's just that unique need that a lot of us don't even think about. Like, we're not even thinking about it, or it hit us differently that are, so I think all that to say that what centers can do to support, I think one is learn, just learn, build bridges, find, as Amelia said, find out who those communities are, the resources for the community, and also just the community. Is there a neighborhood, or is there and again, build bridges, learn, and be open. And also, and even just as you were saying that, Amelia, I was thinking, oh my gosh, we should have some kind of forum to talk about these centers, birthing centers and rape crisis centers, in case an option for that person or for you would have, some may be like, what, maybe, oh, I didn't realize there's this free service where I can maybe talk through. Maybe they want to talk through, maybe they don't want to talk through, but just an option, and someone who understands what that is. But our folks do that by learning, and building bridges, and offering compensation and support when that's warranted.
Yeah. I was going to say, I just want to say what I got from both of y'all too is just understanding the multitudes of a person, and that even in survivorship, there's other aspects that are impacting, influencing, and people may be experiencing because of other things that's related to them. So, yeah. Well, now I'm going to completely pivot. So this is your reminder for folks who are watching. Ask me anything. If you have questions, we want to hear from you. While we wait to see if you have any questions from the field, I'm going to ask a completely random question. Y'all ready? Y'all ready? So here we go. What is your favorite soup? And I'll start while you think for a moment. And yes, I struggled with this question, so I went with two. One is one that I personally made. The top one is a carrot turmeric ginger. Yes, I made that.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
I love this soup. It makes me feel really good, especially when it gets cold, when I'm feeling sick, any of those things. And then the bottom is ramen tatsuya because I freaking love ramen, but I refuse to make all those things. So
Hungry, man.
so I went with a soup that I don't make and a soup that I do make.
I love that. Oh my god, that looks so beautiful, Courtney.
Thank
Jeez,
you.
man.
You know, stylized photo for at least one soup.
I
Then
know. But the lighting was good on the ramen. So okay, wait. The first thing that came to mind, my friend, one of my best homegirls, she makes this incredible wild rice and bison soup. And it's so good. The base, she'll actually like use coconut milk instead of heavy whipping cream now. And so it feels a little less like heavy, but
Mhm.
man, talk about comfort soup for
Oh,
sure. I'm
Nice.
like, I don't think I was like, did I tell her about this? I like almost hope that she's listening to be like, ah, got a shout out. But yes, of course, I mean, who doesn't love, especially around this time as it gets cooler, who doesn't love pozole? I feel like I'm like those are two people don't realize those are native foods. Pozole,
Mm.
the corn and wild rice soup. Yeah, those are. Oh, now I'm hungry. Thanks.
Yep, right. I'm gonna need some soup after this.
it's wild rice soup. I'm gonna have to figure that one out. That sounds oh, that sounds really good.
Mhm.
Man, I don't. God, when you were saying that, I was like, okay, if I drank the night before, I'm just kidding. Menudo.
I knew you were going to say that.
But I like really anything. I mean, any kind of bisque. Like I like that top picture. That looks really good. Looks like it's kind of the texture. Um, but yeah, I mean, any kind of bisque. I like tomato basil, and I'm kind of basic like that.
I mean, it's a
But
good
man,
soup.
It's good.
yeah. But I wanna figure out how to get a recipe or something. What the soup that Amelia mentioned that her friend makes. That sounds amazing.
Well, thank you both for taking a moment to talk soup. All right, y'all, we're going to get back on topic. I'm going to check to see if there was any questions. Someone shared the soup they made. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, what is it?
Um, I gotta be honest, I can't see it because of how the link is,
Yeah, that's
but
okay.
I'll have to go back and
That's
check
cool.
it out. All right. So we'll get back to it, y'all. I got one more final question and then some resources. Oh, let me take the soup down. All right. So, how can we amplify the work of those in Indigenous communities who actively support survivors in their communities?
Yes. So I'm gonna share these links, or Courtney and Allison will share these links with you all after. But there's to me there's different ways to even especially if you're maybe just getting started thinking about like, oh, there might be native people in my community, there might be places nearby where we can contract or refer out for services for survivors. um, but I would really say that a lot of work is being done to sort of to fund and resource grassroots and indigenous led efforts for like community building, power building, like a building of a power base and sovereignty for Native people is huge, right? And there's a couple of places that I think, in particular, if you want to educate yourself on, if you have the means or folks who have the means to contribute financially to or philanthropically to some of these places. The first big one I think is that comes to mind is the NDN Collective, and so they do grant making and have various fellowships and even what do they call those, like microloans, for community groups, right? Who it's like, we know that communities know what they need, right? That people in communities know what's going on. They are trusted in community, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of times it's just like support, resource, fund, Indigenous led, buy-in for efforts where survivors are supported. I know there's various tribal coalitions too. I encourage folks to really look into, especially if you're not in Texas. I know a lot of the tribal coalitions are outside of Texas, but supporting that work in particular is super important. And if you're really just getting started, there's a map. I love the way they say it. I think they call it a living document or something, where they collaborate with various Native people to show folks whose land they are currently on. And so I know TAASA has included that in our conference booklet for a few years now. And so that link is, I think it's like native-land.ca. Yeah. And so you will just enter, your city, the zip code, and they will list out the names and the languages of the original stewards of those lands. And then you can go down your own research about each of those different groups, right? And find out, how can you support, especially now, as we know, there's going to be various groups that are going to need that extra protection, right? And that extra support as they're targeted, right? And so we really just want to make sure that we're putting our funds and our support towards groups that are in community and that are doing that work. And the other one is, and again, this is maybe for folks who, if you work at an agency where philanthropy and giving is is a part of your work, the Decolonizing Wealth Project is also a really great resource for folks maybe who want to get started on reparative giving, I think is the term that they use, right? Nice. But again, that's really educating yourself about how to be an ally to Native people. And I mean, a big way to be an ally to Native people is trust that we've been doing this for a while, and that we need everyone to sort of, within our communities and outside of communities, to see us as having agency and autonomy, and that self-determination, to do what's best for our people and to heal in ways that make sense for us, in all the different ways that we might be healing. So, yeah.
I love that. Rose, do you have any comments on that? How can we amplify the work?
I think Amelia I'm just captivated by everything Amelia is saying. And I'm learning a lot today, and I don't pretend to know, like, I know that I know enough to know that I as a person, I think, TAASA as an organization and also the state as a whole, like, we have a lot to learn about, which is why I'm glad there's a month. Of course, they should never be in the confines of that month, but I really implore all of us to learn all that we can about the history that impact where we are today, those connections, and just not just remembering acknowledging the importance of the education and the real history of all of this and how that pertains to our work, because it is absolutely connected to our work, to our communities. And again, for those who are rape crisis centers or programs around the state of Texas, again, just listen and learn, connect, and compensate. If there's a way to work together, amazing. They're the experts. We're not, we know our stuff here. They're the experts in what they're doing, just connecting, building bridges, but also compensating and not like, oh, we're going to show you our way. No, we can learn, being open to learning from that community as well. So that's all I say. But thank you, Amelia, for all of this. Again, just completely overwhelmed with gratitude that you were able to do this with me. I knew that I wouldn't have the information. I just wanted to be able to figure out how we can support and be that ally for those communities all over the state. So thank you for sharing all the information. And thank you, Courtney, for facilitating and doing such a beautiful job that you always do.
Thank you. Thank you both for your responses. Thank you for the information that you shared. I appreciate you both greatly for going into detail on what we can do. And by we, I'm doing the royal we of everyone who is watching this and everyone watching this further, how we can help and how we can amplify the folks who are doing the work in Indigenous communities. So, yeah. All right, y'all. Well, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Amelia at aromo@taasa.org or rose@rluna@taasa.org. Y'all, thank you for joining us. Yeah, stay tuned for our next AMA. I have no date for you, so whatever that is later on. All right. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you. Wait, some soup now.
I know, right? I'm immediately call my friend.
Bye, everyone.